Hi, my name is Pouyan Darian. I'm an immigration attorney, and I focus my practice primarily on helping people obtain permanent residence and citizenship. We do other things as well, but that is what I focus on all day, every day. And now I've been receiving a lot of calls and consultations recently from people around the country and around the world. In fact, yesterday I had a consultation with a woman who's married to a US citizen in South Korea. And they're all freaking out about this new public charge rule. So I just want to clarify what we, the legal community as a whole, know about this new rule, which went into effect on February 24th. So the question becomes, this new public charge rule, will the government review all the evidence submitted with it at the service center stage or the field office stage? And I'm going to explain why this is relevant. The actual instructions for this new form, the process has become substantially more complicated as of February 24th, 2020. The forms have become longer. And there's this new form, I-944, Declaration of Self-Sufficiency, where the government is trying to reduce the number of people who are eligible for permanent residence based on whether they are likely to be a public charge in the future. Now, what's a public charge? Somebody who is likely to be dependent on government resources in the future. So now, the instructions for the form have all sorts of requirements, which include, showing that you have health insurance at the time you've applied or proof of enrollment in health insurance. They want a complete copy of your credit report, evidence of bills and things like that. But it turns out that not all of these documents are actually necessary in the beginning. Now, let's say you're a US citizen and your immigrant spouse is applying for permanent residence, adjustment of status, and you're reading the forms, and the instructions for the public charge, the Declaration of Self-Sufficiency, specifically state you must submit a credit report, you must submit evidence of health insurance. These instructions are somewhat inconsistent with the actual regulations and USCIS policy manual that the officers will use to ultimately decide whether you are likely to be a public charge in the future. So that's really the key. It's prospective. They are looking at whether you are likely to be a public charge in the future, and they implement a totality of the circumstances standard. So they look at all the variables. What's your ability to speak English, to seek employment in the future? They look at your highest level of education. They look at whether you've received government benefits in the past. So when my clients, I've been inundated with consultations recently asking specifically about the new public charge rule, because people are reading the instructions and it says you must submit a credit report, you must show evidence of health insurance, and it doesn't say you may or that these are optional. It asks you to submit these documents with your application. But just as the family petition, the form I-130, has specific instructions on documents to submit, a lot of them are not actually in the regulations. So the instructions for the form are somewhat inconsistent with how the rule is being implemented. So now, the question becomes, when we file all the paperwork and we include this form, the Declaration of Self-Sufficiency, Form I-944, will they review the evidence at the service center stage before they issue your work permit, employment authorization, and advance parole, which is permission to travel? Or will they just make sure that the form is filled out and then send it to the field office so that an officer during the interview can make a determination as to whether it's likely that you will be a public charge in the future. And then, we honestly don't know the complete answer to this question yet because the rule has just been implemented and I have not yet had a chance to see how they are adjudicating these. I've already submitted a few applications and it's really unclear. So, the instructions say include evidence of health insurance, but we're not sure whether that's going to result in a delay in the work permit at the preliminary stage or whether we can just bring evidence of health insurance to the interview maybe a year down the road. And this is really important because when, let's say, your immigrant spouse just entered the US 4 or 5 months ago, they don't have a social security number. So how are they going to get a credit report if they don't, or a copy of their credit score? How are they going to get health insurance without a social security number? It actually is possible, but very expensive, generally speaking. So if USCIS is reviewing this form and making sure that you have evidence of this stuff at the service center stage before it makes its way to the field office, we might have some problems. They might send us a request for evidence, asking for evidence that you have health insurance. But I don't believe at this point, although I don't know for sure, that that is actually the case. My understanding, after reading the regulations, USCIS policy manual and instructions, and consulting with dozens of attorneys who are very much in the loop with this new rule that has been implemented, our understanding is that it will likely be adjudicated or decided at the field office stage. So you mail all your paperwork to the service center. They make sure that the basic documents are there. They don't really review anything like the information you provided, with the one exception of the affidavit of support form. That is something that they review at the service center stage. And then as long as everything, the basic documents have been submitted, even without any evidence of your relationship, they will then send the case to your local field office, which will schedule an interview. When you're reading the instructions for this form and you see, oh man, I need health insurance for my spouse, this is going to be really expensive, my employer won't let me add them to my health insurance until they have a social security number, don't freak out yet, because we really don't know whether they're going to be looking at all those documents at the preliminary stages before they issue the work permit. And this is important because just like with the affidavit of support form, where they review your taxes at the preliminary service center stage, if your tax documents don't show sufficient income, it will delay the work permit, it will delay advance parole, permission to travel, and you will receive a request for evidence, giving you generally 87 days to respond with the necessary documents. Other examples could include a birth certificate that doesn't comply with the Department of State's guidelines. You'll receive a request for evidence, or a marriage certificate isn't submitted, or it is submitted but divorce certificates from previous marriages are not submitted. These will all cause delays in the process. But other evidence, like photographs of your relationship, affidavits from people who have seen you and know you, bank statements, all these things are not reviewed at the preliminary stage at the service center. The service center will just make sure the basic documents are submitted, and then your work permit will be issued and your case will be transferred to the local field office, which will schedule an interview. And honestly, most of the evidence probably won't even be looked at until 10 minutes before your interview begins. So a lot of people don't have evidence in the beginning, and I tell them, just submit whatever we have and continue to save evidence and bring it with you to the interview at the end of the process. So in summary, let's say your immigrant spouse, or you are the immigrant spouse, and you've entered the United States within the last 6 months or a year or so, and you've been pretty much self-reliant. Don't worry about submitting documents in the beginning, like proof of health insurance or a credit report and things like that. But do submit whatever you do have, evidence of your highest level of education. If you've ever taken English classes, submit those documents in the beginning. And then later on, once you have your social security number and work permit, which should be months before your interview in most cities, you'll be able to obtain much more evidence. So don't read the form instructions and take them so literally, because they're inconsistent with the regulations, or not completely consistent with the regulations. The point here is that you should just apply and submit whatever you have at this point, and the worst case scenario, we will receive a request for evidence asking for additional documents. But delaying the process would be a mistake, especially right now, because the fees for the forms are about to increase very drastically. I think the proposed rule for the green card application is supposed to increase the fee from $1,225. It's supposed to increase it by up to $900. So if you don't have all this evidence yet, of evidence of self-sufficiency, just file the forms and the paperwork. Your lawyer can help you do this, and obtain as much evidence as you can about your ability to support yourself without being dependent on the government before the interview, which is at the tail end of the stage. And by then you'll have a social security number and you'll have the evidence to bring with you to the interview. Okay, so since this rule has gone into effect, I've already submitted many of these applications. I've been consulting with people non-stop around the country by video chat, and people who are local in the New York City region, metropolitan region, come in person to my office, but even they sometimes prefer to do it by video. And it doesn't matter where you live in the United States or around the world, I'm available for you. And actually, a very large percentage of my cases right now are with clients whom I've never physically met, and they put their lives in my hands. And I take that as a very serious responsibility. My team's always available to assist you. We have a pretty fast turnaround time of around 10 days, although we can expedite it. So right now, the key takeaway from this is don't worry about the process. If you're going to do this now and use a trusted attorney. And if you have any questions whatsoever, please contact my office. You can give us a call or even text us at 914-885-3961. You can shoot us a Facebook message. You can email us at contact@darianlaw.com. And whatever questions you may have, I will resolve them for you. And remember, this is all I do. So you can really trust that your case will be prioritized like you are our only client.